This past Monday, on January 6th, the lawyer representing Keffe D in his upcoming Tupac murder trial requested that the charges be dismissed. And this is that motion to dismiss. And it includes this odd detail that Mr. Shakur allegedly died as a result of the multiple gunshot wounds. Is that just alleged? Nevertheless, a hearing for this request is scheduled for January 21st. And with the trial set to begin in just a little over 2 months, the big question is, will this work? Will this case get dismissed? First, here's the legal argument that Keffe's attorney, Carl Arnold, seems to be making for the case's dismissal. Back in 2008, Keffe did a proffer session to a task force led by LAPD Detective Greg Kading, which is in our documentary Murder Rap, where Keffe first made his claim that he and members of the Southside Compton Crips gang, including his own nephew Orlando Anderson, had participated in Tupac's murder.
I gave it to Dre, and Dre was like, no. And Lane's like, give it to Papa, too.
And the terms of a proffer deal are that those words cannot be used against you. It's sort of a limited immunity. And a year later, Keffe made basically the same statement again to Las Vegas police. And I don't know what the terms were for that second statement.
Who got shit?
I know, so give me your shit.
Keffe's attorney, Mr. Arnold, claims that his client's constitutional rights are being violated because, quote, the Clark County District Attorney Office has offered no reason as to why it waited another 14 years to prosecute a case against Mr. Davis. Of course, it seems that Arnold is ignoring the elephant in the room, which is Keffe D's 10 public interviews that he did on television and on YouTube, plus his book, all released between 2018 and 2023, where he talked openly about his alleged role in the shooting of Tupac. The BET series Death Row Chronicles, where Keffe did his first public interview about the case, aired in February of 2018, and that led to the case being reactivated. I know this because, as I've said before, I met with Las Vegas detectives on the case in May of 2018 after alerting them to the show's release, because I'd worked on the show. And by July of that summer, the media had also caught on that the case had been reopened. A year later, Keffe started doing more interviews on channels like Vlad TV and The Art of Dialogue. And he continued doing that for the next 4 years, right up until his house was raided in the summer of 2023. And all the while, Vegas police were apparently building a case. It's Detective Work 101 that if your suspect is talking, let them talk. And Keffe was talking. And on the first page of this motion to dismiss, Keffe's attorney refers to his client's confession as coerced, which I think is just ridiculous. Even if you claim that his statements to police in 2008 and 2009 were coerced, this still ignores all of the public interviews he did about the case. Keffe's attorney also seems to argue that you can't be convicted of a crime based solely on your own confession, and that there's no corroborating evidence to support various details of Keffe's claims about that night in Las Vegas, which in my opinion isn't entirely true. For example, a former friend of Keffe's named Corey Edwards went on A&E years ago, and he claimed that he was in Las Vegas the night of Tupac's shooting, and he corroborated aspects of Keffe's story about what happened that night.
So we was all standing there talking, they finna go over there to the club. And we rode over there.
Club 662?
Yeah, to wait on them and confront them, make his response. We got over there and waited around for about an hour. Nobody showed up.
And in a 2006 statement to detectives, Edwards had already placed Keffe in Las Vegas the night of Tupac's murder, and a hotel reservation proved that Edwards himself was there that weekend. The revelation of this during one of Keffe's bail hearings last year seems to be what set him off in court, ranting against Greg Kading and the prosecutors.
Mr. Greg Kading had them boxes at his house for 15 years in his attic, doing all kind of TV interviews. Them boxes should not be allowed in a case.
Now, Corey Edwards' statements are public information, and there may be more witnesses and informants who've offered additional corroborating statements, but I'm not going to use my platform here to name them. Keffe's attorney also claims that Keffe was given immunity, and that the state of Nevada has failed to honor previous agreements of immunity that were made with Keffe, in a reference to LAPD Detective Greg Kading's 2008 proffer session with him and that follow-up interview he did with Las Vegas police the following year. But the state of Nevada had nothing to do with Greg Kading's 2008 proffer agreement with Keffe. They weren't involved in that. They didn't even know it was happening. And so they didn't agree to anything. And the case they built against Keffe doesn't appear to have used his 2008 statement to the LAPD or his 2009 statement to Las Vegas police anyway. Again, it seems a large part of the case is built on Keffe D's public statements, which aren't covered by any immunity agreements.
I keep it for the code of the streets. It just came from the backseat, bro.
And the basic terms of a proffer agreement are that you are only protected from having the words you said during that proffer session used against you. It's not blanket immunity. Kading even tells Keffe this during their 2008 proffer.
What is said right here cannot be used against you, Keffe.
But as I understand it, if you go on CNN the next night and you tell that same story again to the whole world, that can be used against you. And I think the argument goes that that's essentially what Keffe did when he went on BET and YouTube years later to tell this story again and again. Had he simply kept his mouth shut after those two statements to the LAPD and Vegas police back in 2008 and 2009, he would probably be a free man today. Keffe's lawyer also argues that because it took so long for charges to be filed against his client, quote, too many witnesses have died and the unavailability of evidence has occurred during the prosecution's delay of this matter. But if that was a viable argument, it seems like no cold case could ever be closed. But the reality is, cold cases are closed all the time, now more than ever, even cases much older than this one. Just because a suspect escaped prosecution for decades doesn't mean they can't ever be held accountable so long as the statute of limitations hasn't expired. There's also a bit of a contradiction in the argument being made here, in my opinion. On one hand, Keffe's attorney is arguing that police can't use Keffe's statements to the police in 2008 and 2009 because he had immunity for those statements. But then he's also questioning why Keffe wasn't prosecuted 16 years ago when he first made those statements. It's like he's saying, why didn't you use this evidence that you aren't allowed to use sooner? Complicating things more for Keffe with these statements, he's caught in what Greg Kading is referred to as a catch-22. Because reportedly one other aspect of a proffer agreement is that you can't lie when you make your statement. If you do, the deal is off, and your statement can now be used against you. Well, Keffe's previous attorneys claimed that the public interviews he did talking about the case were just for entertainment.
The lawyers for Dwayne Keffe D. Davis say public statements and interviews he made and gave about Shakur's murder were for, quote, entertainment purposes.
And his current lawyer says he outright lied, implying that he just made up the story.
You do not think he had any involvement in the murder of Tupac Shakur?
No.
None?
None.
He's a liar then? That the statements...
I would definitely say he's a liar.
But that story that he told all those outlets lines up with what he told Kading during his proffer. So it could be argued now that he's implying that what he said in that proffer also wasn't true. So even though I don't think prosecutors need it, I think it may be possible now that Keffe's earlier statements to police could eventually be used against him. But that remains to be seen. On January 15th, the prosecution team submitted a response to Keffe's motion to dismiss, reportedly stating that Keffe has no immunity, claiming that a judge would have needed to sign off on any immunity agreement with Keffe, and that they based their prosecution on his public statements about Tupac's murder, not on his statements to police in 2008 and 2009. So, will the case against Keffe be dismissed on the 21st? If it isn't, his trial is still set to begin on March 17th, 2025.